Welcome to Dodgers Dogs. As part of the Dodgers Daily Network, Casey Porter, Austin Brubaker, we bring you Dodgers Dogs together for the first time in a minute. Life gets crazy this time of year, so we've been doing it as good as we can, trying to figure out when each one of us can go on. We have not been able to figure out a time where both of us could come on. Super excited to talk to you again tonight, Austin.
Yeah, Casey, it is great to see your face again. I think the last time that we did this was when I was in Arizona.
Yeah,
I was literally holding up my phone in order to do that show. I'm glad that I'm back home, not having to do that. Not because I don't want to be in Arizona. Arizona is a lot nicer than what it is here in Michigan right now, but not having to hold up my phone for a whole stream is definitely very nice. Casey, it's great to see you and excited to talk some more Dodgers baseball because since the last time that we interacted, a lot of baseball has taken place, and so excited to dive into that.
Hey, I wanted to mention Ryan Falla. I communicate with him every now and then. He does great work over there at Blue Madness. He used to be Dodgers 2080. You guys know him as Tim Rogers. Whatever you just know, it's Tim Rogers. He does great work with Tim over there. He covers the Angels too, and he keeps commenting about Garrett McDaniels, man. And I told him when Garrett got taken in the Rule 5, dude, he's stuff over execution right now because he's coming off of injury. But Garrett McDaniels is a nasty left-hander. So every time I see Ryan Falla tweet or send a post out about him, I like to repost that and remind Ryan and Angels fans just how good Garrett McDaniels. So I wanted to start with congratulations, Garrett. We'll get into the Dodgers talk, but wow, he's turning heads with the Angels.
He's starting to turn some real heads. His stuff is absolutely electric. It's nasty. I had the privilege to be able to watch him for about a month, maybe month and a half or so when he was down in Great Lakes. Got to see him a couple of times down there. His stuff is ridiculous. Angels because they drafted him in the Rule 5 draft, they got an incredible talent. I love when we get to cover those guys that might not have received opportunities with the Dodgers. He probably wouldn't have, because of the people that are in front of him in line, received that opportunity with the Dodgers. Now he's primed, especially because he's succeeding a lot in Angels camp, to get a spot on that major league roster and try to be able to stick on the major league roster for an entire season. So happy for him and happy that Ryan Falla and everybody else seems to be wanting to cover Garrett McDaniels, because that's a storyline to watch, just like there's tons of storylines to watch, Dodgers and former Dodgers, and we'll be covering both of them.
How about Shohei Ohtani hitting a home run in his first at-bat back against the Angels? It's like a scene out of the movies. It's Saturday night. It's the first night game. You got flashbulbs popping. You got people everywhere with their eyeballs wanting to catch a peek of Shohei Ohtani. I mean, it's like when you're a little kid, you climb a tree to get a peek of Babe Ruth. I mean, that's literally what this is at spring training, and he just goes yard. I mean, it's like, wow. I mean, Shohei Ohtani is bigger than life, man.
Oh, it's star power, man. And I didn't realize the full effect. I had actually seen Shohei Ohtani when he was with the Angels. I went on a road trip, and one of our stops was in Kansas City, and the Angels were in town, so I had a chance to see him then. But to see that comparison when I was back at spring training, to see the number of people that flew in from Japan, to see the number of people that were just there to see Shohei Ohtani. On that Saturday that I was there, I had the ability to be able to watch a little bit, or at least caught wind that Shohei Ohtani was throwing a bullpen. And the crowds that were gathering around that were absolutely unbelievable. He has a star power that is so unique about him. And to be able to, and because of that, and because of the performance that he has, it's no surprise when he goes out there and hits a home run in his first at bat against the Angels during then. He is absolutely amazing at just about every single thing that he does. I have no concerns whatsoever about him going into this season. I think the magic that was part of the 2024 season, there's no reason to expect there to be anything different about the 2025 season, albeit maybe not as many stolen bases, but you're going to get some pretty effective innings out of him this upcoming season, or at least the expectation is that out of him.
So what do you think about Sasaki? I've never seen him pitch. Honestly, I had never seen him throw a single pitch other than like a rogue video every now and then. So I'll give you my thoughts here in a minute. What do you think, though?
Yeah. Similar to you. That was my first time actually sitting down and like, okay, there's actual live gameplay of Roki Sasaki going out there to pitch. And man, stuff plays incredibly well. And the stuff that he was able to showcase, the fastball, which touched 99, you can see that potentially getting up to 100, that fastball velo, something that's really important for him to be able to generate. And it's so awesome to see him get back to those levels. And then that splitter, man. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I'm really excited to see what Roki Sasaki can do. We talked about him a lot during this offseason at being the best value in years coming from a free agent because they signed him to a minor league contract. And if you get that type of stuff from a minor league contract, man, there's a lot to be excited about and a lot that the Dodgers can work with Roki Sasaki. Incredible first impression last night, or was it? I think it was last night, right? With Yamamoto and Roki Sasaki doing the piggyback start.
Yeah. And I don't think they're going to use his minor league option. I think I think that's a good fallback if whatever, but I don't think that's going to happen. But I will say, the fact that you have Blake Snell, Tyler Glass now, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Shohei Ohtani, you have all of these great pitchers. I do think that takes quite a bit of pressure off of Roki Sasaki. That gives him room to breathe. And we saw, hey, the fastball is 99.2. The first one he threw was 99.2 in the past. Now, these have been radar guns in different countries, so we'll see how that plays with American radar guns. In the past, he has not touched 100. He has sat 100. He has hit 101 miles an hour. That's the type of art. Matter of fact, I think he has the fastest registered pitch, and he beat Shohei Ohtani for that. Don't exactly quote me on, but I think I'm correct on that. And he is a guy that, as good as the fastball is, major league hitters will catch up with that fastball. We even saw that in his first outing. Orlando's mentioning that right now. So the splitter's great, and super exciting. It is nasty, but I'll say this, the slider's got to be good. As we go on, what's going to determine how he's going to be really good, a really good major league pitcher. And I can see why people say he might end up being maybe like the best pitcher in the major. I see why people give that type of scouting report. So I'll say this, the speed of which he gets to be that elite level, the stuff is there. So it's kind of like Edgardo Henriquez. What we don't know right now is how close is his execution to his stuff. And like Orlando's saying, he's got to be able to land the slider. The splitter is great, but once it gets a profile, like I'll give you an example. Baseball Savant last night, they mislabeled like 4 or 5 of his pitches because his splitter looked like it looked like a slider or whatever it may be. So as hitters get more of a book on him and they know which split fingers not to swing at, if he doesn't land those for a strike, that kind of thing. So he passed step number 1 for people like us in that, oh yeah, he does actually have that stuff that everybody's talking about. Mm-hmm. Step number 2 is the execution to actually consistently get major league hitters out. Am I being a little bit too harsh there? Am I being a Debbie Downer?
I think that is accurate, but I think he is underneath the correct coaching staff to be able to help land that stuff for execution, because they consistently target this specific type of profile, the profile that is incredible with stuff. And they've even targeted guys that have splitters and working with them. And I think they can work with this and be able to turn this, who has Roki Sasaki has insane stuff, as we had mentioned, turn him into something absolutely ridiculous. It is the steal of the offseason. It is one of the steals, in fact, maybe one of the biggest steals of the past 10 Major League Baseball off seasons, with how they went about getting him, and the fact that he's going to be a Dodger for at least 6 years, I believe. Unbelievable. Roki Sasaki, definitely worth going out and making sure that they use their international bonus pool money on him. Unbelievable with what they were able to get out of him. Still additional steps with his development, but that's going to come with the process of getting adjusted to major league pitching. So just like what it was at times with a player like a Yoshi Yamamoto, remember during the first game last year with Yamamoto, he got ambushed pretty hard.
Yes.
There might be some of those steps with Roki Sasaki, but if you be patient with a lot of the process, I believe in Roki Sasaki and his ability to make those adjustments, and I think he's going to be a phenomenal pitcher. And this is just the first sign, just a small taste of what we're going to see from him coming forward for the Los Angeles Dodgers.
So Chris Fauborg's asking the question, did Roki's performance last night open the door for him to start Game 2 in Tokyo? It wouldn't surprise me. I don't think that would be because of a meritocracy, like, oh, Roki Sasaki's one of the 2 best pitchers we have right now. I don't think it would be because of that. I think it's because the Dodgers are so well-rounded. They can understand that, hey, this guy is good enough to make this start. We're in Tokyo, Japan. What an opportunity this would be. Andrew Friedman let the cat out of the bag, okay? If we can improve our team and move the ball forward towards winning a world title and also gain a cornered market in Asia, those are 2 goals that we're going to go hand in hand and try to do. So the Dodgers will consider the fact that they're in Japan into their decision-making. They've already kind of let that cat out of the bag. So I do think definitely the door's open to start Roki Sasaki. You don't have to throw him 5 innings. You can just say, hey, go out there and throw 1 inning. Make it a spectacle, make the fan, tell everybody in Japan that he's starting, get all that hoopla, make the Dodgers, just cement themselves that much more in the Asian market, and then throw whoever you need to throw at that point. But I would say if he does start, that doesn't mean the Dodgers are making the statement or claim that, okay, our number 1 is Yamamoto, our number 2 is Roki Sasaki, and everybody's behind that. I don't think that's a statement that would be being made there.
No, not at all. I don't think that's a statement that the Dodgers would do. Rather, this is a unique opportunity that they might not have too many opportunities in the future. Now, it's totally possible and totally conceivable that Major League Baseball might want to go back to Japan, especially with the superstar talent that they have with Shohei Ohtani during some term of his contract. But that's not a guarantee as far as I'm aware. They aren't coming back there. And you have a unique opportunity to be able to have 2 really good pitchers that are from Japan and be able to start in those games. So I'm fully expecting Yamamoto to take the ball in Game 1. And with Game 2, it's one of those things where, as an organization, how much better off is it going to be with starting Roki Sasaki for 1 game versus a Blake Snell or a Tyler Glasnow, while also being able to capitalize on the opportunity and potentially create future opportunities. This is the part of the exact same argument that we've used in the past with a Chris Taylor and wanting him to get 10 years. It's not just because of the 2025 season. It's because of a reinforcement of we actually care about our players and we want to make sure that you are treated well. Well, one of the ways you can go ahead and treat somebody well is for Roki Sasaki to have him actually pitch in his home country. I think that would be something that would be great for him, a place for him to get his first start and be in an environment that's comfortable for him, while also being a reassurance that, yes, we do want to take care of our players, and that can be used, as funny as it sounds, as a bargaining chip for some other players in the future, whether that's somebody from Asia or whether that's for an example of them targeting another free agent. Just another thing that they could potentially do with that. And it would be one of those things if Roki Sasaki was not quite there yet, or you didn't believe that he was ready to start. And I think with what he showcased during the game last night, I believe that he can be ready to at least go out there and give 3-4 innings, whatever it is. Whatever you need.
Have more time off. That's the thing that's beautiful.
Whatever you need to be able to do that. I think because they set that up, they have an opportunity to not just give something back to the player, but also to use something for negotiations in the future.
I think CNAV's on it. I think you start Yamamoto and Sasaki in Tokyo. I think you come home, your domestic opener. That sounds so stupid. The domestic opener. With all these modern day analytics terms like Woba bacon, all that kind of stuff, right, Austin? Why not? Let's call it the domestic opener. I think CNAV's right on it. You start Snell and Glasnow for those, and away you go. So that's how I would go. And it's kind of like, first of all, you have to fully believe that Roki Sasaki can win the game. If you think that Roki Sasaki is going to go out there and put your team in jeopardy of winning, okay, this isn't like high school senior night. I'm not saying that. If you don't think he can go out there and do the job, you can't pitch him. But if you do think he can go out there and do the job, then there's no reason not to. This happens all the time at the highest levels of professional baseball, not necessarily major leagues, but I guarantee it happens in the minor leagues. Like grandma and grandpa, mom and dad drove, or even like a Choi. His dad's in town for a week, and I promise you the Dodgers want to know that his dad's in town for a week. They want his dad to see him pitch. They're aware of all of those situations. That stuff happens all the time because this is an organization that believes in nurturing the human being, because if you nurture the human being, it's like any other company. It's like Google. If you make happy employees, even if you pay them more and it costs you more to have those employees, because they're happy employees, they are going to make you more money because they're going to be more productive employees. The Dodgers firmly believe that the happier that they can make their players off the field with their experience with the Dodgers, the better they will be on the field. So I think those are all considerations.
It's all considerations, and that's why I think it's something where they're probably going to start Yamamoto, and then assuming that everything goes well with the next week or so in spring training, I would expect Roki Sasaki to be that number 2 starter because of what you outlined and because the unique opportunity that they have to be able to give something back, not just to Roki Sasaki, but also the fans of baseball in Japan. And this is going to be a really big series for baseball because they're going back to Japan, and because Japan is such huge fans of baseball, and part of a lot of superstars are coming over from the country of Japan. So important.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And so I'd tell you another thing about Sasaki too that would make me not hesitate whatsoever is that he had a lot of eyeballs on him. I mean, he's coming in after Yoshinobu Yamamoto. He's playing for the Dodgers, this and that. He looked to me like he was throwing an inter-squad scrimmage on a fall day for a college team in terms of just not worried about the environment. It's like he didn't even notice the environment around him. It did not seem too big for him. So I did not see any starry-eyed. I didn't see any nervousness. I didn't see anything like that. So that would also indicate that, hey, he's ready to go, and he will be okay mentally to start that game too.
Yeah, I totally agree. I have full confidence in his ability to be able to go out there and perform, and I think it's going to be absolutely electric when that happens. And I'm excited for opening day because we are 13 days away from opening day in Japan. 12 days if you want, or 12 and a half days if you want to count the number of hours it's going to be, because it's going to be at 3:00 in the morning on the West Coast. It's coming up really fast. And so I'm sure they have all of this mapped out, kind of how they want to do it, with a little wiggle room of what they want to do with the rest of the roster, both for the Japan series, which is probably, the roster is probably going to look slightly different, particularly on the pitching side for that series, in comparison to what the roster is going to look like for domestic opening day, which happens when the Los Angeles Dodgers open up the season against the Detroit Tigers.
What'd you think about Yamamoto? Gave up a couple runs early. Other than that, what'd you think?
I'm not worried about Yamamoto really at all. I mean, he got hit around a little, particularly in that first inning.
Hung a curveball.
Yeah, that stuff is going to happen. For a lot of these guys, and this is something that I try to hesitate with a lot of this, is not overreact to too much of the outcome of the performance. I think it's something where, I think he knows himself, and I think he's working on providing a little bit of length, like that he was able to provide those 4 innings for the Dodgers yesterday, and I think he's going to be just fine. That curveball that he hung, this is going to happen from time to time, and I think that's something where hitters, because they're professional hitters, are going to take advantage of that. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, nothing too much that I had to take away from Yamamoto. I think he's going to be just fine.
Yeah. I don't have any – I have not actually done any of the research on this, so – this actually could be wrong, but I don't think it is. This is just it kind of seems that way in my own mind type of thing. But last year it seemed like Yamamoto's curveball was either like perfect and it got swing and miss, and he would say throw 10 curveballs and like 8 of them would be the best curveball in baseball, and you couldn't hit it, and it also was a strike and you had to swing at it. But then the other 2 were complete hangers that got hit out of the ballpark. It seemed like it was the hanging curveball that got him hit out of the park quite a bit last year. So when he threw the hanging curveball last night, that was just kind of more like he does that every now and then. I mean, that's just kind of what Yamamoto has done since he's been a Dodger. Again, don't exactly quote me on that because that could be wrong, but that's another one of those kind of in my coach brain. Just that's what's kind of just that's been an impression for me. And then also the second hit that he gave up was he got behind the count. That's on him. When you get behind the count, he made a good pitch. He threw a fastball to the glove side on the outside corner. I can't remember who it was, but the hitter was just sitting 2-0 dead red on a fastball and hit it. Now, the Elly De La Cruz thing, he hits a routine ground ball to shortstop. The Dodgers had the infield drawn in, and this was the first inning. I'm not sure that I've ever seen a club draw an infield in the first inning in a regular season game. So 1,000 times out of 1,000 times, the Dodgers are going to play back and give that run up. And they're playing forward in spring training because they want to work on a situation. Hey, let's work on this situation in a game speed, and let's see how it looks. And then Elly De La Cruz then hits a couple, a high chopper that would have been a routine ground ball, but ends up in a base hit because the infield's drawn in. So in a regular season game, Yamamoto gives up one run, and really the only two things that I think were on him in terms of you got to clean that up, Yoshi, would be the hanging curveball and then getting behind the 2-0 count that forced him to have to throw a dead red fastball that got nailed for a double. Those are the only two things that I came away with.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And those situation type things, I think it's important for the Dodgers to provide opportunities for especially the starters to work on them, which it sucks giving up an additional run as a result of that, but it was something that the Dodgers infield was able to do. They were able to work on that situation. And that's something that you're starting to see them start to do and manipulate, even just some of the things like mid-inning pitching changes. I'm sure they wanted some of these guys to go out there and get a second up and down or whatever those type of situations. We're starting to see the Dodgers maneuver those type of abilities in there or those types of situations with a lot of different guys. And so we're starting to see them ramp up for spring training because a week from today, they're not going to be playing spring training games in Camelback Ranch. They'll be on a plane out to Japan. Yeah,
they will. And so kind of getting into some of the position players, Will Smith, who two-time All-Star, awesome player, when he is in the lineup, either catching or DHing, the Dodgers win. At least last year, more than I think it's like 63% of their games. It's more than 60% of the games. When he is now sometimes he's DHing and Austin Barnes is catching. So Austin Barnes is part of that 60% when Will is not necessarily catching. Now, it's a smaller role, obviously, especially now that the Dodgers have Shohei Ohtani. So whenever Will Smith is not DHing or catching, not in the lineup at all, the Dodgers are a little bit over 500. Which, to be honest with you, when you're throwing your backup catcher and that kind of deal, you can live with that because, I mean, if Will Smith catches, 110 games, right, and you win 60% of those, that's 60 wins. And then when Austin Barnes is in there, then you win. That's your 95 wins right there. And that's won the NL West. So that's a pretty good formula. So the Dodgers are right around 500 when Will Smith is not in the lineup. They win more than 60% when Will Smith is in the lineup, either catching or at DH. So I would say the Dodgers probably win close to 55% or whatever of the games with Austin Barnes back there. And how about this? Austin Barnes so far in spring training, which we know, we've seen Will Smith wear down before. A couple of years ago, it felt like Austin Barnes was struggling so much that Will Smith had to catch too much, and because of that, he wore down, didn't have a good playoff, right? And so Austin Barnes is hitting .462 so far in spring training. His OPS is 1038. It's okay, yeah, small sample size, whatever. I mean, it's spring training. Let's see how the length of the season plays on. Well, how about this, Austin? Okay, since July 4th of last year, Austin Barnes is hitting .324. Since July 4th of last year. Now, that's 68 at-bats. That's still a fairly small sample size, but for a backup catcher, Austin, especially one Will Smith catches quite a bit. I mean, 68 at-bats is quite a few. And so since July 4th of last year, Austin Barnes hitting 324. Now, name me another team that since July 4th of last year has a backup catcher that's hitting 324.
It's a good question. I don't know the answer to all the backup catcher statistics, but I think that goes to show you some of the value that Austin Barnes has. Not just, and this is something that everybody points to because it's so true, with his ability to work with the pitching staff, but also his abilities to somewhat still be able to contribute offensively. You pointed out some good stretches that Austin Barnes has, and this brings up a good question. He's having a really good spring so far, and I think it also is important that he's being able to do this because we don't necessarily know. We're assuming that Will Smith is healthy enough to be able to go ahead and start the season, which there have been some reports coming out of spring that there might be a little bit concern with him dealing with some sort of lagging injury that took place during the course of last season. So that brings into question just how healthy is Will Smith. It still seems to be bothering him, particularly when he's running a little bit. Is Austin Barnes going to have to take up a little bit more of a role early in the season to be able to help Will Smith heal a little bit more, which if that's the case, Will Smith likely would sit a little bit more on the bench if he is on this roster. So seeing these signs from Austin Barnes being able to perform offensively early in camp, I think is a good thing because he has a great relationship with a lot of the pitchers on the pitching staff. So that aspect is essential. That's important. That's the aspect that you want from a backup catcher. If you're able to get much of anything from the offensive side out of them, as long as they have an extraordinary relationship and work incredibly well with the pitchers, that's an added bonus. And so seeing him being able to perform thus far in spring training, really good sign from Austin Barnes, particularly because of some of the worrying concerns that there could potentially be with Will Smith. I'm not pressing the alarm bell quite yet because we've seen him out there, but it is something to keep in the back of your mind and also be recognize that Austin Barnes is an alternative. They also have Hunter Feduccia and Dalton Rushing as part of the equation to be able to help back that up.
Yeah, more so Hunter Feduccia because he's already on the 40-man roster. So let's get into some pitching talk. We have a question here from Mike Boyer. And by the way, I wanted to get up in this Pinsanity. Thank you so much for joining. Van Mills, so glad from Charlotte, North Carolina, that you're able to finally join a live chat with us. And by the way, River Ryan is listed from Charlotte. He's not from Charlotte. He's from a small town that's outside of Charlotte. They listed as Charlotte so people, because they don't all the time get. Now, where are you? If you just say he's from Charlotte, it's a lot easier for people to digest. But yeah, home of River Ryan, and then also Peyton Martin is from Clemens, North Carolina. So, and then also Garrett McDaniel, who we just talked about with the Angels, he's from North Carolina too. So, lots and lots of baseball talent. I'll tell you this: I've never talked to or met anybody from North Carolina. I was mentioning this about Venezuelan players, why the Dodgers love Venezuelan players like Janer and Diego and all these F-Rod, Frank Rodriguez. You've gotten to meet them, Austin. Have you ever met a Venezuelan player that you didn't want to be friends with? I mean, they're like the kindest, most polite people you'll ever meet, aren't they?
Oh, I think I directly said that when I posted some sort of tweet about F-Rod, Frank Rodriguez last year when he had the walk-off base hit. Incredibly nice people coming over from there. Yeah, absolutely. Venezuelan. The players that come over from Venezuela, just been an absolute pleasure that the Dodgers have drafted, or not drafted, they've signed and brought over. They've been an absolute pleasure to be able to interact and get to know.
I say that to say I felt that same way about all the people I've met from North Carolina. They feel like the same type of mentality in person that we have here in Oklahoma. I'm sure they're in Michigan too. So thank you so much for joining Van Mills from Charlotte, North Carolina, Mike Boyer, Pinsanity, Daniel Berry Sports Highlight, Michael Krawick. It is morning time all the way from Francais, Austin.
There we go. All over the world. That's what I love to see, Dodgers Dogs.
Orlando looked like the hitters were hunting the fastball. Going to need the slider or cutter and you're talking about Roki Sasaki there. And then to piggyback on that, CNAV is saying two hitters against Roki ambushed his fastball and just missed a home run, one righty and one lefty, even though they were 98. And that just goes to show major league hitters, they're different than everybody he's faced. His stuff is insane. That kind of goes back to what I'm talking about. He will have to execute, so he has another start coming up in spring training, and it's going to be really interesting to see how well he does execute as far as against major league hitters on a consistent basis. But I don't know that I've ever. Okay, so kind of to rewind here, Dodgers win the World Series last year in really remarkable fashion. They go get all these incredible free agents, including Roki Sasaki and all these guys. They re-sign they get everybody they want, and I'm not sure that I mentioned it the day before spring training started. You have all these prospects to watch, then you have all this firepower, star power, celebrity power to watch. I'm not sure that I've ever seen a more interesting, entertaining, and productive spring training, and I'm not sure there's ever been this much excitement for 2 different opening dates for the Dodgers. I mean, you have one in Japan and you have one at home.
Yeah, it is exciting, and you can tell by the crowds that are showing up to watch these spring training games. They are so excited for Dodgers baseball, and you can see it in a lot of the action over the past several games or so. I know it was a rough start for the Dodgers record-wise, but there's been a lot of fun action. Last night was one of the most fun conclusions that I've ever seen to a game, with all of the different prospects and stuff that stepped up. Jake Vogel hitting that double, Gator going there. Even Alex Freeland had a nice play at shortstop, and then we got to see Tibu, Jose Rodriguez go out there and come in mid-inning and get 3 swings and misses. Jack Dreyer, who I know is getting a lot more buzz because a lot of people just assumed that they hadn't heard of him, so they assumed that he wasn't any good, but it turns out Jack Dreyer is really, really good. He went out there and finished the job last night. That was so incredible to be able to watch, and he is making a huge impression during the course of the spring training. He's leading this Dodgers team in the statistic that we talked a lot about with Jose Rodriguez, swinging strike percentage. Not just is he striking out 40-something% of hitters in spring training, which again, take spring training statistics with a grain of salt. We're only talking about 4 innings, but we're talking about during those 4 innings, a 29% swinging strike percentage, meaning 29% of Jack Dreyer's pitches are ending up in swings and misses. He's just
not strikes. Pitches.
Not strikes, not 29% of strikes, not 29% of swings, 29% of the pitches that come out of his hand, which basically means 3 out of 10 pitches that come out of his hand swing and miss by the batter. It's ridiculous what he's been able to do thus far, and especially because there is some openings in this bullpen because of the absence of guys like an Evan Phillips, a guy like a Michael Kopech, likely not going to start the season, or at least start the series in Japan with the Dodgers. I don't think there's any expectation that either of them are going to be on the roster because of an opening, because Edgardo Henriquez, I think, is going to miss about a month or so with some sort of undisclosed injury. This is opening up some opportunities potentially for a Jack Dreyer to sneak his way at the very least during the Japan series. Because if you remember back to the Korea series last year, they had a couple of different extra relievers that were part of that roster because you don't need 5 starting pitchers to pitch 2 different games. And I don't necessarily know how all of the rules work out, but I know like James Paxton last year did not make the series or the trip over to Korea and wasn't part of that roster. You instead had guys like Gus Varland was part of that roster, JP Fireeisen, Kyle Hurt. Could we potentially see a Jack Dreyer because they need a couple of extra relievers, and because the Dodgers, some of their relievers are missing out? Could we see Jack Dreyer make that trip and potentially be part of this roster over there? He's making a great impression early in camp, and just like we knew that he would, and just like he has continued to do at the minor league level, he's absolutely excelled. And at some point, merit should win out, and Jack Dreyer is going to get an opportunity perhaps sooner than we could have imagined because of the apparent lack of opportunity there seemed to be. Now there might be an opening. Now there might be an opportunity, and we might just see Jack Dreyer run through that opportunity.
Yeah, or Ben Casparius. So
here's what happened.
Yeah, here's what happened. Hey, here's how last night's game ended. You ready for this, Austin?
Yeah.
Tibu came in dealing. GLP got an at bat. Vogues got 2 hits last night. Gator got the game winner. Fetty had an RBI. Bubba got an at bat, and Maytag got the save. That's how last night's game ended. Woo! Baseball's awesome, right? If you want to hear that in English, okay. So Tibu is Jose Rodriguez, the pitcher that came in and got three swings and misses. GLP is Griffin Lockwood-Powell, who, by the way, has had a really good. I mean, I mean, he is what he is. He's not going to make you go, whoa, this guy's unbelievable. Wow, we've got to put this guy on the roster. He's not ever going to do that. He's not going to win showcase tournaments because he's not going to have any one aspect of his game that makes you go, whoa, like Josue de Paula every once in a while will hit one, and it's like 178 miles an hour, and whoa, man, that sounded different. So GLP doesn't have any of those one tools that just stand out in a showcase setting. So he has done exactly in his spring training exactly what he is. Just guys like Tim Neverett and Rick Monday, and I assume everybody else in the Dodgers are like, man, this is one solid player, man. This is a dude you can rely on. This is a guy you can trust. This is the guy you want on your team. That's the kind of spring training Griffin Lockwood-Powell has had, GLP. That's the kind of player he has always been since he was signed as an undrafted free agent with the Dodgers. Gator is Austin Gothier. I mentioned on the last show, he's bulked up. He's had some great seasons, has not gotten any shots. He's not on the 40-man. I really worried that he would try to add some lift or try to pull the ball more, try to hit more home runs. I know Jacob Amaya did that whenever he was trying to, when he was with Tulsa, he's like, well, maybe they want more home runs. Well, and you try to guess what would actually, what's going to get Gator on the roster? Being Gator. So the hit last night just looked like Austin Gothier. I mean, stay inside the ball, let the ball get deep, hit the ball to right field about 94 miles an hour, and just gather hits. And if that's good enough for the Dodgers, I remember Jacob saying this just like it was yesterday. It was one of our first in fact, I think it was the second interview I ever did with a player. Jacob said, you know what? I've come to the conclusion this is who I am. This is what I am. And if it's good enough for the Dodgers, it's good enough. If it's not, it's not. But I can't try to do something I'm not. So I say all that to say I was glad to see Gator with that at-bat. That was the first at-bat all spring. It looked like he was settled in and actually approaching his offensive game like we remember the Gator, Austin Gothier. Bubba is Bubba Aline, a young man out of Philadelphia who is a 2022 the B1G, the Big Ten Player of the Year. Fetty obviously is the very talented catcher, Hunter Feduccia, that's on the 40-man, and Maytag is Jack Dreyer. So, again, Tebow came in, GLP got in at bat, Gator got the game winner, Vogues had 2 base hits, that's Jake Vogel, who had a single and a double last night. Bubba got an AB, that's Bubba Aline, and Maytag got the save. That's Jack Dreyer. They throw that in the oven and let it bake, and it comes out that baseball is awesome.
Oh, baseball is so. I mean, it might not look a lot, or you might be excited like, oh, the Dodgers came back. They were down late in the game and they came back to 1. But to see it come specifically from these different type of players, especially different players that I don't know if they're what their opportunity is going to look like for the Dodgers, especially this season. Seeing them go out there and succeed, absolutely awesome. They're incredible players, and it was a great run to be able to do that. These are incredibly talented baseball players, and they just showed just a small taste of just how good they are. So those are the fun parts. Those are the fun moments that are part of that are sprinkled in there in spring training, especially on the prospect side that you get. Not just the success, but to see them go out there, have some of those moments, get out onto the big field. So cool to be able to see. Okay, so let's get into the starting staff. So you've got, you've got Blake Snell, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Roki Sasaki. Let's say when Shohei Ohtani gets healthy, you're going to go to a 6-man staff. So you got Blake Snell, Yamamoto, Roki, Shohei Ohtani, Tyler Glasnow. Who is the 6th starter? I know who I think it is, but who do you think it is? I honestly, at this point, it's either Dustin May or Tony. I think it's a slam dunk right now. Okay, go ahead. I think it's Tony Gonsolin. You think it's Tony? I think that's a slam dunk. He's looked absolutely fantastic. He's looked like a starter. Dustin May looks like a guy that, again, coming back off of Tommy John, the execution's not as good as that they would like it. And so, to me, at this point, Tony Gonsolin, first of all, has looked better than Bobby Miller. Okay, so I think Bobby Miller is probably 3rd in that equation. Yes. Landon Knack hasn't looked great yet. Ben Casparius might be in that, but I think Ben Casparius is going to be a bullpen arm. I think Landon Knack's a spot starter bullpen type arm. I think the 6th starter spot is between Bobby Miller, Tony Gonsolin, and Dustin May, and I think Tony Gonsolin easily has won that to this point. He has looked like a starter every time he's been out there, a guy that I trust to go out there and get 5 or 6 quality innings.
turn the ball over to the Dodgers either with the lead or definitely with a chance to win the game. Dustin May has looked explosive. Like his last outing, his first inning was like, woo! And then he had the up down, meaning he went and sat down, got back up, came out the second inning and didn't look good at all. And so that right there says one inning reliever right now until he gets further away from the Tommy John and the execution gets better. And to me, what Bobby Miller has spelled is still very talented, Roki Sasaki type talent, but still a ways away in the execution aspect. And still probably to me, if it started tomorrow, and I love Bobby, he's in Oklahoma City trying to work on execution. That's where I would be.
And it's totally unfair that comebacker came back and hit Bobby Miller, and that he has had to miss time in spring training. I think that took away a lot of his opportunity to be able to fight for that sixth or fifth starting rotation spot. I think right now we're talking about the fifth starting rotation spot because we're not talking about Shohei Ohtani in that mix. Shohei Ohtani would become the sixth starter, but even though he wouldn't be number 6, he would be somewhere towards the top of the starting rotation mix. I think it's firmly between Tony Gonsolin and Dustin May, and I think regardless of which one that they do, the other person's going to be on the major league staff. There's no question about it. And so then it becomes a question of who do you actually want to start the games, and Tony Gonsolin has had the longer track record, the longer history of starting games. Dustin May has had a very shaky track record with health. And right now we're seeing him progress, work back. It's been phenomenal seeing Dustin May go out there and pitch. And you can see just how much this means to him, particularly in that first outing when he came back. And that once he got through that first inning, just the relief that he had out there just was unbelievable. Tony Gonsolin, I think he would be the better bet as far as the man that would be able to provide both length, which is what you need from a starter, and more consistency on the mound, which is why I think, as you had mentioned right there, I think that's probably a good case for the Catman, Tony Gonsolin, to go out there and be that number 5 starter. Dustin May, I don't know necessarily what role he has. Obviously, Dustin May cannot be optioned down to the minor leagues, which means he has to be on your major league roster. Tony Gonsolin can be, however, you would never option down Tony Gonsolin unless you have absolutely no choice. Like every single person is healthy and we have 0 options.
You DFA somebody. You don't send Tony Gonsolin down.
Although with all of the different, I mean, it depends on where you are at. You would probably look to trade somebody at that point. There just does. With Tony Gonsolin, he is a major league caliber pitcher. He has been a starting caliber pitcher in the past. So be interesting to see how they go about and approach it. I think the logical or the most reasonable thing at this point would probably be Tony Gonsolin with what he has showcased in the past and how he's looking so far. But Dustin May, I wouldn't necessarily completely count him out just because of the stuff is still absolutely ridiculous. I won't completely rule that out at this point. Although I think it is a better chance, or it could potentially be something where they turn it into hey, we're going to turn this into, or one of these guys into a piggyback type start. We're going to do a Tony Gonsolin, Dustin May piggyback start, and that's going to be our 5th start. Something creative like that, or if they want to do that with one of the other pitchers as well, although I think that probably would be less likely. Or could that be something that they do behind like a Roki Sasaki? We're going to throw in a Dustin May to piggyback start with you. Could be something that they do, piggyback start, meaning that Dustin May would go out and pitch 3 to 4 innings after the starter goes out and pitches. I don't necessarily know how they're going to handle it. I'm glad that they have options that are going to be healthy, that are going to be ready to start the season, though. I think Tony Gonsolin is probably most likely, but we'll see what happens.
What would be the case for May to start over Gonsolin or Miller? What case would you make? Make the case for May or Miller to be the 5th starter without Ohtani, 6th starter with Ohtani. Make the case for either one of them to be that 5th starter or 6th starter over Tony Gonsolin. What case do they have?
It's very difficult to be able to make that case. It would have to do with the potential of stuff that they have. If you want to make an argument that their stuff is absolutely ridiculous, and if you like their stuff a little bit better than Tony Gonsolin, I think that case could be made a little bit more with a player like a Dustin May at this point, as opposed to a Bobby Miller, just because we haven't seen a whole lot of Bobby Miller during spring, which makes it difficult to say a guy that's coming back from from getting a line drive back and hasn't pitched a whole lot, you're going to be the guy that we're going to be relying upon on the fifth starter. With a Dustin May, you can point to some of the stuff that he has and say it's absolutely ridiculous, although you can make that exact same argument and say that would be effective out of the bullpen, especially because we are missing an Evan Phillips and a Michael Kopech to start this season, or at least for the first little bit. Sounds like Evan Phillips might be back towards the beginning of April. So it's difficult to be able to make that. It depends on, it also is one of those things where we don't necessarily know all the behind the scenes things that the Dodgers are seeing out of both of these guys.
Right. So would you agree that Gonsolin is execution over stuff? Now, Gonsolin gets a bad rap. His stuff is way better than he gets, but it's just being compared to some of the greatest. It's being compared to Tyler Glasnow and Yoshinobu Yamamoto and Roki Sasaki and Blake Snell. He has great stuff, but I wouldn't say that it's like the most elite, quote unquote, stuff. So would you agree that Tony Gonsolin is execution over stuff?
I would probably agree with that, yes.
Okay. Would you agree that both Bobby Miller and Dustin May are stuff over execution?
Yes.
So execution over stuff equals starter, my opinion. Stuff over execution equals bullpen arm, because the stuff over execution, like at Edgardo Henriquez, you say, man, go out there, you're Dustin May, Bobby Miller, go out there and throw the ball 600 miles an hour. And even if you get behind the count 2-0, which you're going to because you're not executing perfectly, you're going to be able to maximize what you're capable of doing. And instead of throwing 97 as a starter, you can throw it 101 as a reliever and actually give you that margin for error because you can maximize out of the bullpen. So for me, stuff over execution spells bullpen, execution over stuff equals starter. I think Tony Gonsolin is in the category of execution over stuff. I think both Bobby Miller and Dustin May are in the category of stuff over execution.
So I think that's really interesting that you bring it up, and I think there's a balance of stuff and execution that you can say, and balance between starter versus reliever. And here's what I mean by that. I think it's Edgardo Henriquez is a really good example because it's extreme stuff over smaller. The gap between stuff and execution is pretty large, and I think with that, if there's a large gap where your stuff is a lot better than your execution, I think that spells reliever absolutely. If there's a narrower gap between stuff and execution, I think that's where you can see a lot of different starters, even if it's a little bit more stuff over execution. If it's high execution and not great stuff, I think that's when you're talking about a little bit more potentially long reliever type roles, or some of those guys that can help fill in towards those. Ryan Yarbrough is a perfect example of that. So I think the variability between your stuff and execution kind of determines exactly where you're going to fit in with that. And so I think with a player like a Dustin May, I think the gap between his stuff and his execution isn't as big as potentially a guy like a Bobby Miller. I think there's a little bit higher of a step up with his stuff in comparison to his execution than a Dustin May, which I think might lead to a little bit more for this Dodgers team that has high expectations for it. Could lead to a little bit more potential runway for Dustin May to potentially get a little bit of starting pitching time. But I think that's a really good point as far as looking at different stuff in execution and how they balance out, and the degree of which they balance out, I think is important.
Yeah, if you're not somebody who is a high-quality pitcher in terms of execution, you had better be off the charts with your stuff, because we saw even with Roki Sasaki, if all you have is one pitch, the fastball, major league hitters are going to hit it. I don't care how good it is. So to get through a lineup, we know the modern-day metrics would tell you it's very difficult to ask a pitcher to go through a lineup the third time. And, boy, that's always that debate. They just roll through that lineup that second time. They're rolling along. It's like the fifth inning, maybe the fourth inning, and then the manager takes them out. And people are like, oh, my God, this guy's rolling. And then all of a sudden they leave him in one time, and they get shelled that third time, and then people are like, I told you that third time through, you need to take him out. It's a no-win situation. Yeah. Every single fan base complains that their manager doesn't know when to take a pitcher out. Oklahoma State's the same way. People gripe to no end about Rob Walton. He never knows when to take pitchers out. Well, yeah, you know why? because nobody knows when to take pitchers out. That's why they've tried to make it a scientific fact, and they've tried to actually put metrics to it, not to pitch the third time through. And then people complain about that because you're not using your eyes enough. There's absolutely no way to win with it. So if you're not a pitcher that is high quality at execution, your stuff has to be like top 2 or 3, 4 in terms of stuff, like a Tyler Glasnow type of guy, like a Yoshinobu Yamamoto. It can't just be good. It has to be like Hall of Fame elite if you're not really great at execution.
Yeah,
to get through a lineup 2 times.
Yeah,
certainly 3 times.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right. Which means that they've got to find some sort of way to be able to maximize the stuff that they have. And good thing for Dustin May, he's got some incredible stuff. We've seen that in the past. Yeah. We've seen that ridiculous pitch that just seemed like it veered so inside to Manny Machado and got that swing and miss a couple of back years ago. It's a lot of the guys and the Dodgers pitching staff have insane stuff. It's about helping get that execution and that balance between the two to be a little bit that execution portion to get that gap between stuff and execution to grow a little bit smaller. And I think that's the thing that can turn a lot of these players that are a little bit more raw for the Dodgers as far as their pitch ability to make that a little bit more effective and to be able to go out and turn their insane swing and miss stuff into outs, which I think is going to be something that's going to be really important because we don't necessarily know what certain aspects of this defense for the Dodgers is going to be, what it's going to be like depending on who they turn to in center field, what exactly is going to look like on the shortstop and third base, for example, what Mookie Betts is going to do. And assuming that Max Muncy is going to be decent enough at the third base position, there might be some question marks. So having guys that have swing and miss ability and stuff, I think is going to be something that's really important.
Mm-hmm. So, Landon Knack, where are you at? I didn't think he looked particularly good today. I don't mean that to be negative. And if he's watching this, I hope he doesn't get mad at me for saying that. But, I mean, I just think you got to kind of call a spade a spade. He didn't look sharp today to me. Did he to you?
No, I don't think he looked particularly sharp, and that's not the most alarming thing in the world because I think it's something where totally possible he was just working on different type of stuff that allowed the baseball to be hit quite a bit, which he did give up a couple of home runs today. So because it's spring training, I'm going to give him very much the benefit of the doubt because of what he was able to do last year. Look, with Landon Knack, he's going to play a central role for this club. One of the things that he's really, really good at and has consistently provided is innings to the Dodgers. Yes. And it is something that is so crucial because you cannot get this entire starting pitching staff healthy through the entire season with the arms that they have assembled and have them go out and pitch every single one of the game. Landon Knack is going to play a crucial role as part of this team. Today wasn't particularly sharp for him. I think that was pretty apparent. But he's somebody who, when his execution is right, can go out there and be really solid for this club.
4-pitch strike thrower. I love Landon Knack. Super competitive young man. Made just about half of his starts in LA last year, half of his starts with Oklahoma City, hoping to make a bigger impact this year. Justin Robleski has looked fantastic. But hey, we have another question before we get into kind of the comparison that I wanted to get into. We have from our man Daryl Jackson, who always supports us with absolutely everything. So I wanted to make sure and get to Daryl's question. And his question is, what does Jake Vogel provide? I know you know Vogues very well. Young man who was drafted out of Huntington Beach, California. So he's a local boy, and he's one of the fastest players in all of the entire system. Very, very fast. Yeah. Plus defender in center field. Has offensive tools. We've seen that. We saw it last night with the double and the single that he got. But just simply put, and I can't sugarcoat this any other way, he has not put his offense together at the minor league level. Now, he's capable. The Dodgers are going to continue to give him chances because he can run. He has a treasure trove of tools, but it's been a plus defender, offense hasn't come together yet type of situation for Jake Vogel. Is that too hard?
Yeah, I think that's accurate, which is why seeing him get those couple of hits, or at least the double yesterday was something that was really good to see. When he is right, he's able to pull that ball, especially down the third baseline, and be able to hit it over the third baseman. He's able to take advantage of some of the gaps and stuff. He does have a little bit of sneaky power in his bat. It's not extraordinary power, but it's one of those things where the offense just haven't completely come together. Yeah, that was in Wisconsin. I actually don't remember if I was at that game.
Are you in this picture?
I don't see. I think that actually might be the game. That might be the Tuesday game that I came in part way through. Yeah, no. So
that's a light pull that Kyle Nevin hit, isn't it?
Oh yeah, that definitely is. He does have some of that sneaky power.
He does.
That is part of it. But here's the other aspect of Jake Vogel's game, and this is the reason why they continue to have given him opportunities, is because of his defensive ability that he has. You can see the range that he has in center field. He has got a lot of range. He can also play the other positions in the outfield, really wherever you place him, but really primarily center field. And he's got some really good speed to his game as well. So if that offensive component can just add into the mix, if he's just able to find a little bit more consistency with that, the reason why they drafted him when they did will start to come together and be able to put a lot of those different pieces together. Really nice kid. He's one of those, you root for a player like him, but that consistency offensively as he continues to go up in the minor league level is something that's going to have to improve if he wants to make an impact going forward for the Dodgers.
There's no way to get around that. The offense has to come around and reach the potential that he is capable of. So we've talked about the starting staff for the Dodgers. The bullpen's going to have some openings. You mentioned that because of Michael Kopech and then also Evan Phillips. Evan Phillips will be back, he said, sometime in April. So I think maybe a topic to talk about here is that next level of reliever. Bobby Miller, we mentioned, hasn't been out there since he got hit in the head. So I think that there's like three guys competing maybe for one, maybe two spots in the bullpen, at least early. And I think those three are Ben Casparius, Landon Knack, we've just talked about Landon Knack, and then Justin Robleski. So if tomorrow you had one spot and you had those three guys to award that to, you're looking at Ben Casparius here. Who gets that spot? Or is it a situation where you bring one guy up, let him throw a piggyback 4 or 5 inning long relief, send him back down, bring the next guy up?
It depends on the situation, but particularly in this situation, especially early in the season, and because this is something that's going to happen where there's going to be a little bit more gap in between games. In the Japan series, they're only going to be playing 2 games. I think you kind of want to go with the guy that you think has the best stuff that is out there, even if it might be a little bit shorter outing, although this guy can go out there and provide some length because he has been a starter throughout his tenure at the minor league level. That's Ben Casparius. I think he's looked incredibly comfortable. Nothing to say against Landon Knack, who been a little bit shaky at times, as we saw in the outing today, but still I think has been entirely reliable, is going to receive a lot of different opportunities. Nothing to say against Justin Robleski, who's been really sharp so far in spring training.
He gave up the home run his first outing. He's been money.
Yeah. And we didn't even get a chance to see the game that he seemed to have a lot of success in against Oakland. The one game that wasn't televised. A little bit disappointed at that. Robo really solid, and I think he is he's definitely making a statement for himself and a case for himself. But we've seen Ben Casparius go out there and have a little bit more experience coming out of the bullpen, and especially because it's one of those things where they're a little bit more limited on guys that are comfortable or have come in towards the back end of games and been able to pitch in relief situations. Currently, it's Tanner Scott, it's Kirby Yates, it's Blake Trinan, Alex Vesia, and Anthony Banda are the guys. And if you have like a Dustin May or Tony Gonsolin being able to provide a little bit length out of the bullpen, you might want one of those guys that has a little bit more execution, not necessarily look for a little bit of length out of the bullpen. You might be able to save a Robleski or a Landon Knack and make sure that they keep as starters right now. So then when, not if, when you need them to come up and take over a certain stretch of games to just be able to fill in as starters. Ben Casparius, though, seems to be one of those guys where, man, if it's one of those things where he needs to transition to the bullpen, and that's going to be the best fit for him, I think he's ready to roll with that. And I think even there seems to be increased confidence, and there's a lot of talk, even from Dave Roberts himself, about Ben Casparius potentially taking over that role.
Yeah, how about this guy? He's turned some heads, I guarantee you. Nick Frasso that you're seeing here.
Oh, yeah.
Has he made, of course, he's coming off the shoulder surgery, so he missed all last year. Has he turned enough heads to maybe leapfrog a Ben Casparius, who's done nothing but dominate?
Not yet, I would say. It's one of those things where, and this is nothing against Nick Frasso, but you also have to look at the actions of the organization.
Right.
They did option him back to minor league camp. And I think that's in part because he missed all of the 2024 season. And so you want to make sure that he's comfortable, that he's ready, and he's got a little bit of time underneath his belt before he goes out there and starts in a high pressure major league situation that he has not had the ability to see yet. I think with his stuff, with him being able to come back, I think the Dodgers organization is incredibly thrilled.
Yeah.
And I think
Absolutely.
for him, I think it's one of those things where, yes, they could put him back into a starting pitching role, which that could be something that they do. It could also be something where I wouldn't be completely surprised if they decided, hey, we could really use him potentially in some sort of late inning relief as well. No matter what role that they decide to put on Nick Frasso, his stuff is ridiculous. And with how he's able to go, you can see some of the crossfire ability that he has. It's just ridiculous stuff, and it's going to be incredibly effective against major league hitters too. So whatever role that they can find for him, I think first it's about making sure that he's comfortable, making sure that he's healthy, and then finding a way, or it's being aware of potential opportunities to be able to help fit him into the mix.
Okay, so we've talked about starting pitching. I think 5th without Ohtani, 6th with Ohtani. Starting spot is Gonsolin. I think May in the bullpen. That's fluid. That could all change, right? Bobby Miller as he gets healthy again. I think Landon Knack, Ben Casparius, Justin Robleski are all fighting for an injury bullpen spot, and I think right now probably Ben Casparius has the edge on that. If they had to say, hey, you got to pick one of those guys tomorrow, I think that would be Ben Casparius. Nothing against Robo or Landon Knack. I think they're fantastic, but Ben has just been. Man, Ben Casparius was super impressive today. And so let's talk about another battle. Man, this is why I was so excited for spring training this year. Not only do I get to see Shohei Ohtani and Freddie Freeman and Mookie Betts develop at shortstop and all this celebrity, man, you get to see these incredible battles. So how about the battle for the last spot position player-wise? So I think right now it's Eddie Rosario, David Bote, Andy Pages, James Outman, Hye-seong Kim. I think you got 5 guys competing for one spot. Who is it?
Yep, that's exactly right. This is what on the Monday night shows or the shows that I've done myself. This is a topic that I talk about extenstively because well, here's the thing about this. This is
I'm trying to put you on the spot. Which one? Which one of the 5 gets the one spot right now, Brubaker?
I can't. When talking about this, I can't just say one name and then have it be something where yes, that is the name because there is sacrifices and there is things that you have to give up no matter who it is. So with this competition, with this battle, I think the 2 long shots right now, despite some of the success that they've had in spring training, are Eddie Rosario and David Bote. Bote has been phenomenal. The one thing that I look at for each one of those guys is what are the Dodgers actually doing with them? And with David Bote, despite the fact that he's been phenomenal this spring training, which I went over a lot of the numbers the other day, it's just ridiculous. I don't think he had a hit during the game today, but still really, really good with what he's able to produce. David Bote's been phenomenal. The issue that I have with that is they have almost exclusively played him at the third base and the first base position.
He's played some second base.
He's played a little bit of second base, but it hasn't been too necessarily extensive. It might be 1 or 2 different games. I think if they were taking a little bit more of a serious look at him, especially if he's going to be on the big league roster, you look at the opportunities of where he's actually going to play. I think that's going to be it would have to be at the second base position to be able to fit him in, unless it's an off day for a Max Muncy. So that's where a little bit of my hesitation, outside of the fact that he's not on the 40-man roster, outside the fact of everybody on the bench is a right-handed hitter as well. That's where a little bit of my hesitation comes in.
So he's played 3 games at second base and 6 games at first base so far defensively for the Dodgers here in spring training. So I mean, that's an indication they're willing to play him at second base. And to me, that's a defensive log right there. That's a manager just trying to find a spot to watch his offense. Hey, let's figure out a place to play him defensively so we can watch him hit. I mean, so right here you can see 3 games at second, 6 at first. I think they're definitely. I think he's going to make the roster. He's versatile enough defensively. He's a professional. They know that. He's going to make the roster if he keeps hitting. And I think they've been just trying to find spots to put him in the lineup to see if he can keep hitting. And he has. He's hitting .455, OPS 1296, and he has 2 home runs, and he has in 22 at bats. He scored 6 runs. So David Bote has been simply fantastic. So
this brings up an interesting question: is to how much weight do you take spring training performances, especially in just a 22 game sample size? How much are you looking at that? How much are you looking, because there's other stuff that they're evaluating. They're not just looking at the box score and being able to see what David Bote is able to provide. They're also looking at elements of his swing, whether they made some changes to his swing to see how that's performing. There's a lot of other different elements to that, but how much weight do you actually put into the spring training specific stats? Because I think there's a little bit of a mixed history with what goes on, especially when you're dealing with such small of sample size.
Andre Lipsius, I mean, he came out and he was hitting like 600 for they were Tacoma, Oklahoma City was, first series of last year, and he hit like 650 in that series. Never got a look. So I understand what you're saying there. So, but here's my problem with your argument there. David Bote, Eddie Rosario, they're in the same boat. I mean, you're both evaluating them over the same. So whatever your evaluation system is, everybody's getting evaluated by the exact same evaluation system because the Dodgers don't have a track. I guess Eddie Rosario. So in your argument there, if you're just going to say, hey, it's not a big enough sample size, we're going to go with the guy who has the longest track record, regardless of how anybody does, then what you're telling me is Eddie Rosario won this spot before they even started playing games.
Not necessarily. I'm saying that it's not your sole decision with a lot of that stuff doesn't solely come from that. It also comes from an aspect of how you're able to fit in position wise, how are you going to be able to fit in, and what exactly is the role that they are looking to fill out. And I think with David Bote and with Eddie Rosario, let's start with Eddie Rosario first, because the only role that I could see with Eddie Rosario filling in, because you have Michael Conforto and because you have Teoscar Hernandez in the corner outfields, and those are going to be everyday type players, which means Eddie Rosario, who I believe the only positions that he's going to play is going to be one of the corner outfield spot, would be if you wanted a left-handed bat to be able to come off the bench and be able to help perform. I don't think you're going to rely on an Eddie Rosario to go out there and play center field at all. So I think that he would have to really, really perform, which he's had the 2 home runs during the spring training that have been exciting. I got to see one of those in person. But I think that's a little bit more of a far stretch unless you are under the impression that you absolutely need a left-handed bat to come off the bench to be in pinch hitting situations, and then have them be able to substitute on off days for either Teoscar Hernandez or a Michael Conforto, even though if it's for Michael Conforto, it wouldn't be the reverse of that split. So I would put Eddie Rosario, even though he did have, I believe, the home run today, as a little bit more of a long shot to make this roster, not on the 40-man roster. David Bote, it's a good point. He's played a little bit more second base than what I had thought, and it could be something where
155 games at second base at the major league level.
At the major league level.
Yes, 155 games at second base.
And I think he's played some first base. He's played some third base in the past as well, which makes it a little bit more challenging. But I think with the David Bote, you're talking another one of those guys that's not going to be an everyday type of starter. You would get him in order to have him be a little bit more of at least a part-time type of player, which if you want to play Kike Hernandez a little bit more, that could be an option. That could be an alternative that you decide to turn to. I just find it a little bit more of a hard stretch to be able to do that, despite the great performances that he's had so far, which you got to give David Bote credit. He has been absolutely phenomenal so far for the Los Angeles Dodgers. I just find that a little bit more of a stretch for me. I'd have to do a little bit more digging into that.
So David Bote, you can see here, he's played one game in left field, one game in right field. He is squarely an infielder, and mainly he's played some second base, mainly a second baseman and third baseman. Eddie Rosario has not played. He has played one game at third base in his major league career. He is squarely an outfielder, and he is a corner outfielder that can play center field if your lineup goes wacky and you play 16 innings and you need an emergency catcher. You know what I mean? It's like Max Muncy's the emergency catcher. So Eddie Rosario would be like the emergency center fielder if you pinch hit, pinch ran, and done all those kinds of things. And so when you look at those, David Bote's definitely an infielder. Eddie Rosario is definitely an outfielder. James Outman is definitely an outfielder. Andy Pages is definitely an outfielder. You want to know which one of those five can play both the infield and the outfield?
Which one's that?
Hye-seong Kim. And here is the complicated part of that. I would say out of all of those, James Outman hasn't had a good spring training. I'm not going to say that. Andy Pages has not been impressive in spring training. He has not done anything that makes you go, man, you got to put Andy Pages on the roster. He has not done anything like that. He hasn't had that spring training. James Outman has not done anything to win back the center field spot. You know I love James Outman, but you know I love meritocracy more, and I love the Dodgers the most. So that's how all that goes, so you have to make that statement. And so the one guy of those five that can play both infield and outfield is Hye-seong Kim, which is why I think that's who the Dodgers wanted that spot to go to. But I just don't think he's done – I don't think he's shown offensively to be advanced enough to be a guy that warrants a spot on this 20 – I mean, we're talking about a 26-man roster that has historical that is historically difficult to crack. And if you're going to put a Hye-seong Kim on there, that's kind of a head scratcher to me at this point.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this conversation, especially for Hye-seong Kim, comes particularly when I think about it. What I want is what is going to be best for the development of Hye-seong Kim. Excuse me. What's going to be best for the development of him going forward as a member of this organization, because he's one of the guys that. So there you go. He's going to be one of these guys that's going to be part of this roster for years to come, because they signed him to a 3-year contract that has 2 option years as well. Is it the best thing for his development, which we've seen him be a little bit overmatched at times? We've seen him had some decent enough contact, but not necessarily the always being able to make contact, being able to find ways to get on base. It was great to see him have that infield single today where he's able to beat out. The second baseman's got be much quicker on that. And credit to Hye-seong Kim for being able to make that a play. But I think for the development of him going forward, and I think this might be something that the Dodgers are seeing, because you look at the times that he is actually playing in these games. He came into the game during the second half of the game with a lot of the minor leaguers. And I think that perhaps could be a little bit of a sign of where they're thinking, not because
Wilson the stretch.
Hye-seong Kim is performing significantly poorer than a James Outman or an Andy Pages. He's not really. All 3 of those guys are struggling to different degrees this season. But I think for the best of the development of Hye-seong Kim, is it going to be you're immediately going and you're going to struggle and play part-time against major league hitters, and we hope that you're able to adapt and succeed? Or is it going to be we are going to have you go through a little bit of an adjustment period, and when you feel like you're ready, we're going to find a way to be able to help call you up and have you be part of this mix and get consistent, regular at-bats to get adjusted to baseball over here in America? I think that's going to be the question, is what is best for the development of Hye-seong Kim going forward. And I think for him, because he has not spent any time over in America besides the spring training setting, that might be at Oklahoma City, or that might be the best place for him to be able to start. Whereas you can make the argument for either a James Outman or an Andy Pages that their development isn't going to happen in Oklahoma City. Their development might need to happen at the major league level.
Yeah. So I'm going to pull up. I'm going to give you a pushback on Hye-seong Kim here in a minute. And then what I want you to do is I want you to talk about Andy Pages here for just a couple of minutes.
All right. So Andy Pages is fascinating as an individual as part of this roster conversation, particularly because I think with a lot of us in our mindset, he has been struggling to this point in spring training. But I think out of the three of the guys that we had mentioned, he is probably the guy that most people, or a lot of people, would probably have the most confidence in offensively wise to be able to go out at the big league level. Part of that could be a little bit of recency bias because he was good during the 2024 season. But I think he was one of those guys that came up through the system because of his ability to be able to hit and perform offensively. The question remains for him, and right now I would probably place him as the favorite to be able to be the 13th player on this roster. But with that, there still remains a question because I don't believe that Andy Pages is necessarily a center fielder. I think he is a corner outfielder, that they're putting him into that center field role. And there has been warning signs that everything isn't necessarily completely perfect every single time around, to say the least, whether it's the routes that he takes for balls, whether it's when it bounces off the wall, not being in the correct position, whether it's being picked off at first base. Just these small little mistakes start to add up a little bit, to the point where you question whether if he's going to be one of those guys that, especially if there might now be concerns offensively wise, which I'm not saying is necessarily the case because of a very small spring training sample size, but even if that were part of the question, he has to be one of those guys that has to be able to hit, to be productive, to be of value for this team, because there are question marks for the other aspects of his game. Whereas with a player, let's point him to the other player that is playing mostly in center field in James Outman. At least you know that you're going to get really solid defense out there. At least you know that you're going to have a guy that has the ability to go out there and provide a little bit of speed. And we've seen James, he's probably been the player that I've been watching most closely during the course of spring training, and even paying attention to the game where that wasn't televised, because there might be a little bit more of a change of approach where he's attacking a lot of pitches early, which is why he seemed to have a lot of success against that game in Oakland. With him, it consistently remains, is he able to make enough contact to where the strikeout percentage is not astronomically high?
25%. That's all I ask.
I would, at this point, I would even take 30. I would take 30%.
Yeah.
If he strikes out, if the strikeout percentage was 30%, absolutely, I would take that for him.
Yeah.
For him, that's what he has to do. So then the question remains when it comes to an argument, and this is what I've done a lot of different arguing between James Outman and Andy Pages. Is it one of those things? It comes down to an evaluation of which do you value more, and what's going to be best for 2025, and what do you weigh more? What's going to be best for 2025 or 2026 and beyond, or say, because with an evaluation of Andy Pages versus James Outman, do you think that Andy Pages' offense is going to be that significantly better than the potential downside that you're going to get with defense and maybe even base running, versus in comparison to a James Outman, who would be a lefty that would sometimes come off the bench? You don't even necessarily have to play them every single game out in center field. It could be almost exclusively against right-handed pitching, or however you want to be able to mix it up. Throw in Miguel Rojas, Kike Hernandez in the mix, and Tommy Edman playing a little bit of time in center field. How much do you value the defense that James Outman and some of the base running that he's able to provide? And then it becomes a question of, okay, which one of these guys do you think could potentially be part of the future of this team? And if you think that you need a right-handed hitting outfielder as part of the future of this team, because you're seeing a lot of left-handed bats be part of this future, is it going to be necessary and important to see if Andy Pages can fit things together and be part of this roster for the future? There's so many different questions and elements that are part of this mix outside of the simple fact that, man, we got to figure out what's going to be best for the 2025 season.
This is James Outman here. Here is what you're talking about. 42.9% strikeout rate. That's like you're saying, you would just take, and like Craig's saying, James Outman still strikes out too much. And
And he's exactly right. And I don't want to sit here and harp on the negative, but you have to call. I mean, you have to state facts, right? I mean, it is what it is. And so here's my pushback with Hye-seong Kim. Here's what makes it complicated. So what's better for Hye-seong Kim? Coming down to Oklahoma City in a place in the middle of the world that he's going to know nobody. He's going to not know anything about the culture. Oklahoma City is way different than Los Angeles. It's even that much more different than where he came from. Okay, so bring him down here where he knows nobody. He's not even going to have an interpreter. He's not going to. It's going to be. I mean, it's going to be crazy for him. I'm just telling you, it's going to be a crazy experience to send Hye-seong Kim to Oklahoma City. Okay, so that, or let him be the 26th player on the roster, the Chris Taylor that gets in at bat every now and then, that gets to play in advantageous situations, that gets to come in as a defensive substitution, that gets to come in and lay down a bunt, get asked to hit a ground ball to the second baseman, that kind of thing, and then also gets to grow around Shohei Ohtani, Roki Sasaki, and Yoshinobu Yamamoto. So if it comes down to what is best for Hye-seong Kim, what is best for Hye-seong Kim?
That's a good question, and it depends on what you see and how you think development is able to come, particularly at the plate, and what you think he could potentially grow into. Part of the reason why I would argue sending him down to Oklahoma City would be of value and of some importance, because the only way that you're going to be able to get your swing right, one of the only ways that you're going to be able to go and help grow is to be able to face pitching consistently, and I think that is an important element to be able to do. Yes, I think culture absolutely matters, and that's actually a really interesting argument that I hadn't thought of him being around, especially them. But I think with him, it's one of those things where I think he can grow and be something that the Dodgers are relying upon in the future. And are you limiting his ability? Are you limiting his role once he joins the team, even if it's something where they didn't have necessarily astronomical expectations, to be one of those guys that, man, he's going to see 250 plate appearances at the big league level at most this season, and how much growth is there going to be had from 2 games a week, or he has, I don't know, 6 or 7 plate appearances. There's just a little bit of a limited growth that I think could have that might limit the player that he could potentially turn into if he doesn't receive consistent big league at bats, which could be the argument of you want him to play a little bit more of a predominant role at the major league level to be in an environment where he's comfortable and allow him to be able to fail. But is there going to be those too high pressures? There's going to be too high of expectations. We saw what happened with a player like a Gavin Lux, where being a big league average type of player was not good enough for the fans within this organization. Is the weight of those expectations early in Hye-seong Kim's career going to be too heavy for him to be able to bear? Because I don't think the expectations is for him to replicate what Gavin Lux. If he did that, that would be beyond phenomenal, because the recent track record in history of players coming over from the KBO isn't necessarily great for even players that had a little bit of a higher degree for him. So is it going to be something where he needs to be in that environment, and that culture environment is going to be protective of him from the outside voices that might slam him for some of the performance that he might have on the field, which might be because he's not completely ready, which, from the small sample size that we have, I don't think he's completely 100% adapted to major league pitching. Just very small observations that I have. Or is it going to be work on a little bit on your craft? We're going to try to create an environment that's comfortable, ready for you. Get a little bit used to this, and then we'll call you up and be part of this. So then the weight isn't as heavy out of the gate from you. I think that's something to keep in mind, is the weight and pressure of being on this specific club with this specific expectations.
So CNAV says Kim doesn't speak the same language as Roki, Ohtani, and Yamamoto, and that's a good point. But I can tell you this, Austin and I see this every single day at the minor league level. So the international guys, some are from Venezuela, some are from Puerto Rico, some are from Mexico, some are from wherever they may be. they group together and they come together and they have each other's backs big time. So they're both Asian, they're both international. All those guys are international. I definitely think that would be kind of like a little pod that Hye-seong Kim could find comfort in. He could find advice in. They could be guys that could take him under his wing and help him transition to the pressures of being a Los Angeles Dodger, even though they're not exactly from the exact same spot. I mean, Jose Ramos is from Panama, right? Jose Rodriguez is from Oaxaca, Mexico. Carlos Duran is from the Dominican Republic. They all swarm together, though. The Venezuelan guys, the DR guys, the Panama guys, the Mexico guys, because they're international and they kind of have a similar type background. They have a similar type. Well, they have the same journey in the sense that they're coming to a whole new place, having to learn a whole new language, and having to face all of those different fears. And so they have that similar background that they're all having to face that. That's where all of the kind of potting together comes in.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. You're coming with guys that, while it might not be, they're from the exact same place. They're not. They come with similar backgrounds and histories that they can relate to that is different from a lot of the other teammates that might have been born in the United States and come up through a very different system. I think that you get a sense of relatability to that I think doesn't come from people that have a little bit of a different backgrounds with you. So with Hye-seong Kim, I think that's totally a fair point. If you want to put him in that environment, especially because there's nobody that's really standing out too particularly much, albeit in very small sample size, I will repeat that over and over again because I very much want to rely more on past history as opposed to the 20 or so at-bats, plate appearances that they've had through the course of spring training. But if you want him to be in that environment, that's fine. But if that is the case, and if Hye-seong Kim is the player that's on this roster, I think Dodgers fans need to temper their expectations a little bit and grant a lot of grace with him coming over, because it is a very different league that he is entering into. So if you look at the KBO stats and see that he was hitting 300 or so with a 118 WRC plus or 130 WRC plus in the past, take a little bit, don't have those exact same expectations and be able to grant a little bit of grace and allow him to be able to go through the course of the development. I hope that he gets the exact same grace that I would want to grant some of the guys that I've seen come up through the system and get to the major league level, if not even more for Hye-seong Kim. And I think that's something that the Dodgers realize. I just look at some of where the Dodgers are actually going ahead and potentially playing him in the games. They're starting to play him a little bit more later in the games, which makes me lean into he might be one of the guys that starts at the minor league level, in part because the game seems to be speeding up on him just a little bit due to the early parts of spring training. You want to make sure that he's completely ready to go for a team with this amount of expectations and the weight and pressure that comes with being a Los Angeles Dodger in the year 2025.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So, okay, so we've had a fun conversation here. So we're going to kind of, well, first of all, we have a super chatter. $5 from Vin1988, my favorite handle. Austin's hat reminds me of a grade point average in high school. Is there a grade point average in high school, Austin?
I would rather not say my grade point average. I would say it was actually pretty good. Pretty good, but I won't brag a whole lot about my grade point average here.
All right, going to put you on the spot. We've had the conversation. So, we talk all the time about the difference between process and results, right? So this entire show is we've been talking about the process. So now we're going to wrap it all up with the results, okay? So we've gone through the process. Let's give some results. Fifth starter without Ohtani, the non-Ohtani starter. The fifth starter without Ohtani, sixth starter with Ohtani. Who is it?
Tony Gonsolin.
At
this point, it's Tony Gonsolin, and Dustin May is part of this team coming out of relief. Perhaps it's a piggyback start, and they switch back and forth. But right now, I'm leaning Tony Gonsolin.
First guy up from the Oklahoma City pitchers.
That is going to be part of this roster for the Japan series and for opening day is going to be Ben Casparius.
Okay.
I think he's going to be part of that. I actually think there's going to be potentially 2 roster spots open right now, because if you look at the projected fan graphs there, I think there's 2 roster spots that are going to be open for that. I'm calling it for domestic opening day, because currently they have a spot filled in by, I believe, Landon Knack and Justin Robleski. I'm not necessarily predicting both of them to be part of that mix right now. I think Ben Casparius definitely fills in one of those holes, and then I could see either Landon Knack or Justin Robleski filling in the other one, or a non-roster invite if they want to call. Do you do a non-roster invite for a little bit?
Last position player spot.
You've
done the process.
Yes,
I'm not letting you bail out going through this whole process again. I need some results, Brubaker. Come on, man.
What I think the Dodgers are going to do, I think it's going to be Andy Pages.
Yeah.
And I go back and forth, and I've gone a lot back and forth with him and James Outman, particularly because James Outman provides you a little bit of known stuff defensively and with the stolen base ability. But I think right now there might just be a little bit too much swing and miss in his game, and nobody else is really standing out a whole lot. And I think they don't necessarily, if they don't have to, want to use Andy Pages last option year, because I think there still is a potential room for him to be able to fit him both from the right-handed bat and position player-wise in this offense in the future. So I think he's got a leg up at this point in spring training, with there being, 5-6 games left in spring training before they head out in Japan. But right now, I'll say Andy Pages.
I had a surprise for you, because I really wanted to put you on the spot, because I haven't got the chance to talk to you in a really long time, and I like being a butthead like that. Plus, it makes for great entertainment. But Vin beat me to it. Vin 1988. Vin 1988 is in their A game today. Okay, so here's the last one. No process, all results, Brubaker. If I'm going to do this in 2 parts. If Austin Barnes gets injured, who becomes the backup catcher for the Dodgers?
If Austin, okay, so we're not even talking about Will Smith being injured.
We're going to do this in 2 parts.
We're talking about Austin Barnes. If it's Austin Barnes right now, especially early in spring training, I think it's Hunter Feduccia.
100%. If Will Smith goes on the DL for 2 months, what happens?
If it's long term, I think it might be Dalton Rushing time.
Ooh, so you're going 2-part, huh? Ooh, that's juicy right there, Brubaker.
And here is the reason why I say that is because it sounds like Dalton Rushing might not be playing a whole lot of time in the outfield, which I think there might be a little bit of disagreement that I have with the organization with that long-term for Dalton Rushing, because long-term, if you want him to be part of this roster, he has to have a little bit more positional versatility, or Will Smith has to have a little bit more positional versatility. But I think because they're wanting him to focus a little bit more on catcher and first base, which he has a lot of experience with both of them, I think there might be a little bit of concerns. And if there is something that happens to either Will Smith, or if there's something that happens to a Freddie Freeman, they have one guy that I think is just about as ready to go at the minor league level in Dalton Rushing to be able to come up and fill that spot. So if Will Smith is facing extended time out, you want to excite the fan base. You want to make sure that this team doesn't fall back a whole lot. Not that Hunter Feduccia is not exciting. He is really exciting, but if to a lot of majority of fans, and because Dalton Rushing is just that good of type of player, I think if Will Smith's going to miss extended period of time, you might turn to him. I think that might be Dalton Rushing time.
So if you need a starting catcher, it'd be Dalton Rushing. If you need a backup spot starter, that's Hunter Feduccia.
For this Dodgers team, yes. If you're talking about other organizations, it obviously depends on organization. I think Hunter Feduccia has a little bit more of an opportunity, but especially for this Dodgers team, yes, I think that's the case right now.
And Hep C, hey, thanks for joining Hep C. I always love it. Hep C joins. Hep C brings an A game every single time, just adds a tremendous amount to our chat. Says if you're going to start the clock on Rushing, you don't do it. So the clock's already started on Feduccia. If you're going to start the clock on Rushing, then you don't do it to go be a backup. You do it to start.
Yes.
I think that explains that whole situation.
Yep. No, I think that's exactly. You're not going to put Dalton Rushing on this roster and not play him. which would
right.
be the case if he is on this roster and if Will Smith is on this roster and just about everybody else is healthy and you don't have any other position that you're going to be able to play him. I think that is the case with Dalton Rushing, which leads to a lot of, okay, what is the future for Dalton Rushing and how they can fit him into this roster, which sucks.
They haven't figured it out.
They have
they
not
just know
figured it out.
Dalton Rushing's a damn good player, and they don't want him to be with anybody else's organization. But they haven't
exactly
figured that out yet.
Yes, and that is something that they're going to have to figure out. But I think right now they are we've seen some injuries and have a little bit of concern with Will Smith.
Exactly.
And Freddie Freeman. We have no other choice but to make sure that we have backup and really good backup for them just in case anything happens or just in case they might need a little bit of additional rest. And Dalton Rushing, that's a really good backup option.
Okay. So evaluate this comment. Hunter Feduccia actually is the better player right now, but Dalton Rushing has the higher ceiling.
I would agree with the fact that Dalton Rushing probably has the higher ceiling. I think most people would probably agree with that, just with the pedigree of where he's at and with what we've seen offensively wise, the extent of offensive wise right now. We've seen Dalton Rushing not have quite as much time at the AAA level as Hunter Feduccia has. So I would say Hunter Feduccia might be a little bit more polished on certain things, perhaps on the defensive side, than a Dalton Rushing. But Dalton Rushing is absolute bulldog. He's a competitor. He is an absolute winner. I find it so hard to be able to doubt that kid.
No doubt.
Dalton
No
Rushing.
doubt. It's just time. It's a matter of time.
Yes,
Hunter Feduccia.
yes.
You have to understand he has caught so many games at the minor league level. He has so much experience with so many different types of pitchers, hitting off a different type. He has so much more experience than Dalton Rushing. And really, unless you see it every day like we get to in person, it's hard to explain how much that actually means to the development of somebody. So when I say that, I don't mean that in any slight whatsoever. I just mean that Hunter Feduccia has grinded so hard. He just has so much experience. I would trust to know what we would be getting from him.
Oh, absolutely. And we've seen that at times through the course of spring training, both offensive-wise and what he's able to do. We've seen him also be able to perform a little bit defensive back there. Both of them, you have a lot of confidence in what they're going to be able to do, which is great to have those couple of options. You'd love for them to have opportunities to play at the big league level. And this is something we've talked quite about, particularly about Hunter Feduccia and him getting an opportunity. Selfishly, as an organization, it's great to have both of those guys as backup options to be able to come up and help fill in shoes if they are ever needed or when they are needed and called upon, especially with they're a little bit being a little bit iffy on Will Smith and him not being 100% healthy.
Yeah. You want to know probably the biggest knock on Hunter Feduccia? He can't play anywhere else other than catcher. I mean, literally, if Hunter Feduccia could play catcher, like Austin Barnes, if he could play catcher, second base, and then also maybe like Dalton Rushing could maybe play a little bit of left field, I think he would have found his way onto a major league roster because he's just a very solid player, but he can only catch, and so because of that, there just has not been there hasn't been any openings for him.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why when we have this conversation of who's going to be the 13th position player, that's the reason why we're not bringing up those two guys' names is because there's just not as much positional versatility in the areas where the Dodgers need positional versatility, particularly at second base and the center field position with both a Hunter Feduccia and a Dalton Rushing at this point. Otherwise, they would be the ones that would be earning this spot.
Yeah. We had a non-Dodgers fan join the chat. They got deleted and hid from the channel almost immediately. So, boy, this has been a tremendous crowd. Again, we have not been together for Dodgers Dogs in a long time. I was super looking forward to it. Been very busy on my O-State Daily side of things, and I know you've been in spring training, and we just haven't been able to get together for a show, so it's been a lot of fun. We had just a wonderful, wonderful lobby of people tonight in our chat. We've had great conversations. So, Austin, final thoughts.
Yeah, it's great to be able to talk back with you, Casey, and be able to have this show and be able to talk all about this. Look, the Dodgers are going to make decisions by what we decide or what our observations on Dodgers Dogs are. Otherwise, they probably would not be as good of a team as they currently are. They're going to make the decisions that they feel is going to be best for them as an organization, and they're looking at all of these different aspects, as well as all the different aspects that have gone on behind the scenes to make this team as good as possible. So whether it's the fifth starter on this rotation, which they have some really good option to be able to turn to, how they're going to construct this bullpen, which for the Japan series, they might rely upon a little bit more of a reliever type presence. We might see some of the guys that you might not necessarily expect to make it on the roster for that short 2-game series before returning to America for the series against Detroit. For the last position player spot, I think that's the one that is probably the most exciting, at least for me, to be able to see what happens, because whoever gets that opportunity becomes a little bit more difficult to see exactly how what some of the other players might get up opportunities unless there's that player really struggles at the big league level. So it's fierce competition and very short time frame, a lot shorter than what other teams are dealing with at this point. They got a little bit more time to be able to see, okay, they would have a little bit more time to see, is James Outman able to swing a little bit less, which I believe he only has one strikeout within his last 3 games. So there's been a little bit less swing and miss in his game, but there's just not a whole lot of time to be able to see is that consistent enough. For Andy Pages, is going to be one of those things where is he going to get enough opportunities in center field to showcase, hey, his defense is good enough to be relied upon pretty regularly in center field, because that's the only position that he's going to be able to play with any sort of regularity out there. With the Hye-seong Kim, is it going to be something where he's going to be able to showcase some of the skill sets that he showed a little bit during the game today with that infield single and be able to provide consistent contact? There's not a whole lot of time to be able to make those decisions. They have a week from today, when we're talking on Dodgers Dogs Live, but as part of the Dodgers Daily Network, they will be wrapped up with a lot of these conversations, and they will be over in Japan or on a plane over to Japan to get ready for that series. So it's very short time frame to be able to make these decisions. The good thing with the Los Angeles Dodgers is they are flooded with talent. So no matter which way they go, no matter which way, if they decide, and I know there's a lot of pushback, and I know there's a lot of other people that are already out. They're already writing off a player like a James Outman. But even if he were to be the one that they made on this roster, this team is still going to be phenomenal. This team is still going to make. This team still is going to make the postseason. Regardless, they're going to be a phenomenal team going forward, or at least that's the expectation. Unless every single player, like what happened in The Simpsons, gets injured and they don't know exactly what to do at that point. That's not the expectation. I still firmly expect this Dodgers team to go out there and be incredibly successful. And I'm excited to see how the rest of spring training in Camelback Ranch plays out.
Just got a text message from Austin Gothier. I messaged him last night exactly what I told you earlier in the show, that, hey, man, just that looked like Austin Gothier. I mean, that looked like Austin Gothier, just slapping a 91 mile an hour or whatever it was. I don't know what the exit velo was, but 91 mile an hour, just line drive to right field, just as easy as can be, man. We're back to Gator. And, hey, again, if Gator isn't good enough for the Dodgers, so be it. It'll be good enough for somebody out there. That's exactly what Jacob Amaya told me. I go back to that, and lo and behold, Jacob Amaya has become a major leaguer. He hasn't had like a steady career or anything, but still, to say that you're a major leaguer, you're 1% of 1%, right? So, hey, this has been a lot of fun, super fun, and like you said, here's the thing about Dodgers Dogs that I enjoy, and I think probably most shows like to talk about the firepower, the superstar, and we do, but the Shohei Ohtanis and the Freddies and the Mookies and all that. Where we really like to dig in is on the margins. I mean, just on all the battles in the back of the pack and all of the just kind of the middle of the pack, the margin type scenarios. To me, those are the funnest conversations because there's the most subjectivity to it. Like, we know Shohei Ohtani is going to be awesome. We know there's really just nothing to evaluate there. The evaluations are all the subjective parts, right?
Yeah, it's the subjective parts that we get excited about because the margins are the things that distinguishes the good teams from the great teams. And those are the things that made the Dodgers so good. It's that part, the battles that we get super excited about because it's meaningful and it's impactful for lives because there's one of these guys or potentially both of them that James Outman and Andy Pies are going to lose their last minor league option. And that could have an ability of what they're going to be able to do for the rest of their big league career because that has a really big impact. Seeing these battles and seeing guys fight for opportunities, as well as, I think probably the part of the show that I was most excited to talk about is what happened at the end of the game yesterday when some of the guys who are at the minor league level got those opportunities, and you got to see some of the players that we talk about quite regularly or have been on this show. I think a lot of those guys have been on the show.
One of them
before.
just text messaged me, so there you go.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, and have them be able to go out and showcase the skills and abilities that they have. So being able to see all this marginal type stuff and these guys fighting for their big league careers, surrounded by the star power, makes for compelling storylines all around.
So
there's not a dull moment in
so
spring training with the Los Angeles Dodgers.
It is so fun. So, hey, I have not got a chance to look at my beautiful bride of 25 years in about an hour and a half, and I'm ready to do that again. And so it's time to go. And you could hear my two beautiful pit bull babies. They're chasing a rabbit or a skunk or something out there. Hopefully they don't get sprayed and I don't have to give them a skunk bath here in just a minute. So, Austin, great seeing your face again. It's great being with you. Maybe Friday night, maybe not. All we can tell you is turn on your notifications because the beautiful bride and I might go out for a date. Friday night, we might not. That's kind of a play it by ear. It is what it is. And so turn on your notifications.
Well, it's also there's a Friday night Dodgers game, so we'll see. We'll see what exactly happens with that. So I don't know exactly.
And OSU plays too. That so
yeah, I know. We also did we get to the Christian Navarro $10 super chat? I don't know.
We did not.
Got to that a while ago.
We did not.
I just want to make sure that we got to that before the end of the show.
Oh, right there. I'm sorry, CNAV. Yeah. Love the show, guys. Is the I Love Bacon Plus similar in the KBO as it is in the major leagues? It's time for Dodgers baseball. That one's for you, Brew.
Yeah, it would be the exact same calculation. The I Love Bacon Plus and the KBO. Right. I'm assuming their bacon is pretty phenomenal over in Korea, just like it is, or the KBO, just like it is in America. So absolutely right.
Show me your drip.
What was that? What's
Show
this
me your
right
drip.
here?
Woo, that's sweet. You got that spring training?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I got one. I got one of those in spring training.
Wow, that's sweet, man. I like it. I like it.
Yeah.
All right, man. We're rambling. This is what you call chatter. We're rambling on. You don't want to hear two dudes sit around and ramble for much longer. So, Austin, thanks again.
Thanks, Chase.
For Austin Brubaker, I'm Casey Porter. As always, it's a great day to be a Dodger.